You ever have a moment so absurd, so vile, it just freezes you in time? That was me, sitting at my kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon, staring at the wall like it held all the answers. Then my phone buzzed. It was my boss, Harold Denton, CEO of Denton Financial. The kind of man who wears $20,000 watches not because he likes them, but because you don't have one. He didn't waste time. Look, I'll cut to the chase, he said, his voice smooth like poison in a glass of bourbon. Have your wife spend the night with me. Just one night. Or you're fired. And no severance. Nothing. Silence. The kind of silence that swells up like a balloon filled with every shred of fury a man can pack into his lungs. But I didn't shout. I didn't swear. I smiled. Okay, I said. And I meant it. Because Harold Denton had just walked straight into the bear trap I'd been building for 6 months. See, what Harold didn't know is that I'd already been working with the FBI. The moment I noticed certain funds going missing in our client accounts, I knew he was dirty. I just didn't know how deep the rot went. So I did what any man with a daughter to protect and a spine made of something firmer than jelly would do. I started collecting evidence. I played the role of loyal employee, took the notes, forwarded the emails, even had a tiny recorder in my jacket pocket when we had confidential meetings. He thought he was clever. Hell, maybe he was. But you can't outgame a man who's already lost everything. And I had lost everything. My wife? Vanessa? We were already dead behind the eyes. The way she looked at me lately? Like I was a dented can of soup in her pristine, curated pantry. I knew about the late-night texts, the long showers after work dinners. And don't even get me started on the credit card statements, like watching someone stab you with receipts. Still, I played along, nodded, smiled, bought flowers, pretended I didn't see the lipstick on a shirt that wasn't mine, because I needed her to be exactly who she was, greedy, careless, and willing to go where the money whispered. So when Harold made his little proposal, I didn't flinch. That night, we had dinner reservations at a high-end restaurant in Midtown, a place with steaks so overpriced you'd think they came from cows that went to Harvard. Vanessa showed up in a red dress I didn't recognize. Probably new. Probably expensive. She was already glowing, already playing the part. But she wasn't the one I was here to meet first. That honor belonged to her daughter. Not ours, hers, from a previous marriage. Emma, sweet kid, deserved better than either of us. She spotted me from across the lobby, ran into my arms, and gave me a hug like it was still possible for people in this family to feel something real. You ready? I whispered. She nodded. I turned. And there he was, Harold Denton, arrogance wrapped in a suit, smiling like he just won a prize. I pulled out my phone, smiled right back, and said, Plan A is go. 5 seconds. Maybe 6. Then the doors burst open and the FBI swept in like a biblical plague in Armani suits. Guns raised, badges flashed. Diners screamed. Tables clattered. Harold barely had time to wipe the smug off his face before they had him cuffed and bent over the very table he reserved for seduction. Harold Denton, one of the agents, barked, You're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and attempted coercion. But it wasn't over yet. The agent turned, looked directly at Vanessa, my wife, and said, Ma'am, we have questions about your involvement. You'll need to come with us. And that was the beginning, not of the end, but of my new chapter. The restaurant emptied like someone pulled the fire alarm on high society. Rich folks in silk and scandal stumbled toward the exits, clutching pearls and overpriced handbags, trying to pretend they weren't all secretly thrilled to witness a real-life arrest. Me? I stood perfectly still. Harold was yelling now, pleading, as they read him his rights. His voice cracked, high and undignified, like a man whose kingdom had just crumbled beneath him. Funny, I always thought he'd go out with more grace. But no, he cried. Blamed everyone. This is a mistake. He set me up. He's a disgruntled employee. You're all being played. I was playing them, but not the way he thought. Everything I'd done had been by the book, because I knew men like Harold don't fall from reputation, they fall from proof. And I had it in spades. Spreadsheets, audio, paper trails so damning a judge could have signed the warrant blindfolded. And Vanessa? She didn't say a word. Not at first. Just stood there, pale, that red dress suddenly looking like blood on porcelain. But then the agent leaned toward her and whispered something I couldn't hear. Her eyes widened. She looked at me, finally really looked at me, for the first time in months. Like she realized she hadn't married a doormat. She'd married a man who'd just burned her ticket to luxury down to the damn studs. Sir, another agent approached me, a younger guy with sharp eyes and a voice like clipped wire. You're free to go? Thank you for your cooperation. I nodded, slipped my phone back into my jacket, and turned toward the exit. Wait. Vanessa called after me. I paused, looked over my shoulder. Is this what this was all about? Some revenge fantasy? You planned this. I smiled. No, sweetheart. This wasn't revenge. I stepped closer. This was justice. Her mouth opened, but I didn't wait for her to reply. She'd said enough in her life. Enough lies. Enough betrayal. She just didn't realize I'd been listening the whole time. The next day, the news broke wide open. Every major network had it. Denton Financial CEO arrested in FBI sting. And right there in the article, buried under legalese and outrage, was one quiet little line. Anonymous employee tip launched a 6-month investigation into Denton's dealings. Anonymous, my ass. I didn't need credit. I needed freedom. I took a leave of absence, technically unpaid, but my new bank account, funded by the Whistleblower Reward Program, was already breathing easier than I had in years. $750,000. Tax-free. Denton's greed was my golden parachute. And I had plans. First, a lawyer. Not some billboard hack with rhyming jingles, either. A shark. The kind that doesn't blink when your soon-to-be ex tries to cry her way out of asset division. Vanessa was lawyered up by Monday. So was I? She wanted half of my whistleblower reward. Said she was entitled to the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. I said, you're entitled to exactly what's in your name. And your burner phone isn't going to help your case. The burner. Yeah, I knew about it. You don't set a trap this precise without knowing exactly who your wife is whispering to in hotel bathrooms. Especially when the guy she was whispering to was also on the Denton Financial payroll. Yeah, she wasn't just cheating. She was colluding with a guy named Reggie Tate from compliance. Turns out, Tate had been feeding Harold inside information, and Vanessa was the middlewoman. A three-way betrayal, in more ways than one. But unlike Harold, Tate hadn't been arrested yet. That was Plan B. That night, as I sat on the balcony of my modest apartment, new place, no frills, clean view, I stared at the city lights and thought about the man I used to be. The one who begged for scraps of affection. The one who swallowed his pride like aspirin. That man was gone. And in his place, someone dangerous. Not violent. Not cruel. Just someone with nothing left to lose. And men like that? They're the most precise kind of storm. Reggie Tate was the kind of guy who mistook rented power for actual authority. Wore shirts a size too tight to show off biceps no one asked about. Used business jargon like it came with a commission. He worked in compliance, which made the irony almost poetic. He was supposed to watch for shady dealings, not crawl into bed with them. But that's the problem with men like Reggie. They always think they're the exception. Like the rules were written in pencil, and they've got an eraser no one can see. And of course, there was Vanessa. She used to come home humming after late meetings with Reggie. Claimed it was stress relief. Claimed I had become distant. No, sweetheart. I became quiet. That's not the same thing. So after Harold's arrest, I waited 3 days. Just long enough for the shockwaves to ripple. Then I paid Reggie a visit. Not at home. Not at work. That would have been too kind. No. I went somewhere he couldn't run, his gym. Found him bench pressing a half-loaded bar, wearing those ridiculous compression sleeves and barking out his reps like an amateur drill sergeant. I waited until he racked the bar and saw me standing there, arms crossed. He froze. Sweat beading. Ego deflating. Hey man, crazy about Harold, huh? He tried to smile. I didn't return it. We need to talk, I said. Now's not really. Now is the time, Reggie. You're going to want to hear this. I bought him a smoothie. Mostly so I could keep him in one place while the next stage of the plan clicked into gear. I know about you and Vanessa, I said casually, flipping through a folder I'd brought. Look, man, don't insult me with the denial. You two weren't subtle. What I want to talk about is this. I slid a printout across the table. Email chains, transaction records, access logs that showed Reggie viewing confidential client portfolios outside working hours, then forwarding them to a private email address. Vanessa's. His face drained like I'd pulled the plug on his bloodstream. You've been selling client data, I said. And Vanessa was your mule. This is insane. The FBI has Harold. They don't have you. Not yet. But they're looking. And all it takes is one more file, And you're cooked? He started to speak. I raised a hand. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down with Agent Fields tomorrow. You're going to tell them everything. In exchange, I've arranged for you to be considered a cooperative witness. If you play it smart, you won't see prison. You might even get probation. And what if I don't? I smiled slow, sharp, tired of the whole damn dance. Then I take this file to the press, to the SEC, to your wife, and your mother, who co-signed your mortgage, by the way. His jaw twitched. The smoothie started melting on the table. Jesus, he whispered. You've been planning this. I plan everything, Reggie. I stood. By the way, Vanessa's not protected. The minute you walk into that interview without her on the list of names you drop, she becomes fair game. I left him there, shaking. That night, I slept. Really slept. No grinding teeth. No checking phones at 3 a.m. No wondering if I was the idiot for loving a woman who'd already started packing her soul for someone else's bed. By morning, I had an email from Agent Fields. Subject line, your lead was solid. We're moving forward. There was one attachment. A blurry, zoomed-in screenshot from a surveillance camera. Reggie Tate, walking into the federal building. Head down. Tail tucked. Game over. The next move? Vanessa. She still thought she had cards left to play. What she didn't know, I'd already reshuffled the whole damn deck. Vanessa always thought she could dance between raindrops. That no matter how hard the storm hit, she'd stay dry. That kind of thinking doesn't come from strength. It comes from never having faced real consequence. And she hadn't. Not until now. The morning after Reggie folded like cheap patio furniture, Vanessa texted me. We need to talk. Dinner tonight? I almost laughed. Dinner? Like this was still some romantic comedy where we'd work things out over salmon and Chardonnay. But I said yes. I chose the restaurant, a quiet, mid-tier Italian place we used to go to when we were still pretending to be in love. Familiar enough to feel safe. Small enough to control the variables. When she walked in, she was wearing her negotiation dress, form-fitting, black, heels just high enough to suggest power, but not so high she couldn't walk away if things turned. Problem was, I had no intention of letting her walk away untouched. She slid into the booth across from me, flashing a smile that had once melted me like butter. Now it just looked like a sales pitch. You've been busy, she said, sipping her water like we were old friends catching up. You too, I said, evenly. Just different kinds of busy. She tilted her head, tried to read me. Look, I know things have been complicated. I'm not proud of everything. But we don't have to turn this into war. There it was. The pitch. That calm, reasonable, let's not ruin our lives tone. She was trying to salvage something. I wasn't sure if it was the marriage or just the money tied to it. Vanessa, I said quietly, Reggie's talking. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. What? He flipped. Sat down with the feds. Told them everything. About Harold. About the insider info. About you. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her grip on the fork trembled. You're bluffing. I took out my phone and played a short, muffled clip. Reggie's voice, unmistakable. In Vanessa Garrison, she was the one who passed the files. I'd send them to her burner. She'd get them to Harold. I didn't know half of what they were doing with them. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. You recorded him? No. They did. Reggie knew. He just didn't care anymore. She leaned back in her seat. The blood had drained from her face, but she was still fighting to maintain composure. So what? You think you've won? Vanessa, I said softly, you've already lost. You just don't know how far the fall goes yet. You can't prove I knew what was in those files. You're right. I can't. But the Bureau? They're very good at connecting dots. I paused, let it sink in. But here's the thing. I'm not pressing charges. Her eyes snapped to mine. What? You heard me. I'm not coming after you legally. I'm not dragging this through court. Why not? Because I don't need to ruin you in a courtroom, Vanessa. You've already done that to yourself. I just want the rest of my life back. Clean. Quiet. And yours? Well, it's about to get loud. She opened her mouth to argue, but I slid a plain white envelope across the table. That's from my lawyer. Divorce papers. You signed them. You walk away with your business, your car, and whatever you can fit into that closet-sized apartment you rented in secret 6 months ago. Her jaw dropped. Yeah, I knew about that too. You've been tracking me? No. Just paying attention. Something you stopped doing a long time ago. She stared at the envelope like it might bite her. And if I don't sign? Then I hand over every detail I've gathered to the feds. Not just about Harold. About you. Reggie's already painted a picture. I'm just the one who'd frame it in gold and hang it in the prosecutor's office. The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. Then slowly, Vanessa reached for the envelope. You planned all this? I met her gaze dead on. The moment you gave yourself to another man and thought I'd never find out? That's when this plan started writing itself. She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask for another chance. Somewhere, maybe deep down, she knew I was the one who finally stopped pretending. Later that night, as I stood alone in my apartment, no lies, no games, no perfume-covered apologies, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But the game wasn't over yet. Because there was one more player left. A silent partner. A snake hiding in plain sight. And his name? Bryce Langston. If Harold was the hammer, blunt, arrogant, reckless, then Bryce Langston was the scalpel. Polished. Surgical. The kind of man who never left fingerprints, just the faint scent of cologne and plausible deniability. He was Denton Financial's in-house counsel, which meant he knew where every body was buried. Probably helped dig a few holes, too. He was also the one name that came up in every back-channel whisper the FBI fed to me. Never on paper. Never directly tied. But always hovering. Always present. Even Harold, in his final moments before the cuffs clicked shut, had snarled. You think I'm the top of the chain? Wait, till you meet the man who made the chain. That was Bryce. And unlike Harold and Reggie, Bryce hadn't made a mistake. Yet, 2 days after Vanessa signed the divorce papers, I set the next domino in motion. A quiet lunch invite, sent from a burner number Bryce wouldn't recognize. Langston, meet me. Private info on the Denton case. No cops. Just answers. He showed up. Of course he did. Men like Bryce can't resist controlling the narrative. We met at a rooftop bar. Nothing too high profile. Quiet view of the skyline. 2 scotches already sweating on the table by the time he arrived. He didn't sit immediately. Just adjusted his cufflinks and stared at me like I was a crossword puzzle missing half the clues. You're the guy who sank Harold. He sank himself. I just pointed out the leak. He finally sat. So, he said, swirling his drink. What do you want? Same thing you do. Survival. A flicker of interest crossed his face. Now I had him. I know you insulated yourself, I continued. No emails. No texts. Just nods in boardrooms and whispers in corridors. He said nothing, but his silence screamed keep going. But you left one thing exposed. I reached into my coat and slid a flash drive across the table. He didn't touch it. Smart. What's on it? A contract draft. From 6 months ago. Between a Cayman shell company and one of Denton's third-party consulting firms. The one that funneled bonuses to Harold's mistress. His jaw tightened. Still not illegal. Except your name's on the digital metadata. You redlined that file. You edited it. From your home office at exactly 2:14 a.m. Now he reached for the glass. Took a slow sip. Didn't speak for a long time. What do you want? He asked again. And this time, he meant it. You're going to step down. Quietly. Health issues or family reasons. Your pick. You're going to forfeit your executive parachute clause. That money's going back into the employee pension fund. And you're going to write a statement, one that outlines exactly how Harold's fraud operated. You're not a prosecutor. No. But I'm the guy holding the match to the paper trail you forgot to burn. He studied me, ice clinking in his glass. And if I don't? I stood. Then I go public. Your name hits every paper in the country. And I promise you, Langston, there won't be a single firm left that'll touch you without oven mitts. I left the drive on the table. Didn't wait for a reply. He was already calculating the odds. His kind always are. 2 days later, Bryce Langston stepped down from Denton Financial. No press conference. No farewell speech. Just a bland internal email thanking the firm for years of collaboration and wishing the team well. The pension fund was restored within the week. And the statement? It arrived at Agent Field's desk under a plain envelope marked confidential. No signature. But we both knew who'd written it. I didn't celebrate. Didn't pop champagne. Didn't gloat. This wasn't about victory. It was about the principle that a man pushed too far, betrayed too deep, could come back from the ashes with his spine straighter than before. But there was one last person to deal with. Emma, Vanessa's daughter. My stepdaughter. The only person in that whole broken house who hadn't lied to me. And she was the one who'd quietly slipped me Vanessa's burner phone. She didn't ask for revenge. But I owed her the truth. And that's where this story turns personal. Emma was never mine on paper. Not legally. Not biologically. But paper never held weight in our bond. She was 11 when I married her mother, awkward, sharp, fiercely observant. Not the kind of kid who ran to strangers or clung for attention. She made you earn it. Every smile, every hug, every ounce of trust. And over the years, I did. I showed up to school recitals. Made her grilled cheese sandwiches shaped like stars when she had bad days. Sat on the bathroom floor with her when she cried through stomach aches. We built blanket forts, argued over movie choices, made up bedtime stories together, half hers, half mine. She didn't call me dad, but she didn't need to. I felt it every time she reached for my hand without thinking. After everything collapsed, Harold arrested, Reggie flipped, Vanessa served, I hadn't spoken to Emma. Not out of spite. Out of fear. Because if she turned her back on me too, I wasn't sure I had anything left to believe in. So I waited. Until one Thursday evening, I got a text. "Are you home?" It was from her. Not Vanessa. Emma. She came by that night. Didn't knock. Just walked in like she used to. Hoodie sleeves too long. Hair pulled back. Her face thinner now, older somehow. I stood frozen in the kitchen. She looked around. Took it all in. No more family portraits on the wall. No scented candles. Just clean silence and plain light. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Getting there." She nodded, like that answer was enough. "I saw Mom last week." My stomach tightened. "How is she?" Still pretending she didn't do anything wrong. That sounded about right. "She said you turned me against her," she added. "Did I?" Emma looked up at me, those same sharp eyes cutting through all the noise. "No," she said. "She did that all by herself?" We stood in that silence again. But this time, it was different. Not cold. Not tense. Just real. "You remember the night I gave you her burner phone?" she asked. "Yeah. I didn't do it to hurt her." "I know. I did it because I couldn't stand watching her lie to you anymore. You were the only one who ever gave a damn." I felt something crack open in my chest. Not pain. Not sadness. Something older. Something deeper. "I'm sorry you had to carry that," I said. She shrugged, but her eyes shimmered. "I wanted you to know," she whispered, "I didn't pick sides. I just picked you. That was it. That was the moment. Not the FBI raid. Not the arrest. Not the court filings or the secret recordings. This was the real reckoning. Because through all the betrayal, all the lies, all the rot that had festered through my marriage, one person had still seen the truth. Had chosen it. Had chosen me. I made her tea that night. We sat on the couch, watching some dumb movie we used to quote when she was a kid. She fell asleep before the credits rolled, curled up under the old throw blanket I couldn't bring myself to toss out. And in that moment, I knew. The story? It didn't end in revenge. It ended in rebirth. But of course, one last surprise was waiting. The next morning, my lawyer called. "We have a problem," he said. "Vanessa just filed a motion. She's suing for partial custody of Emma. Even after everything. Even after losing her reputation, her money, and whatever dignity she once had. She still hadn't learned. You'd think after torching her marriage, laundering insider info, and lying to the FBI, Vanessa might finally bow out of the spotlight. But no, she didn't go quietly. She filed a motion. Joint custody of Emma. Let that sink in. The same woman who let her daughter tiptoe around lies for over a year, who prioritized spa weekends and secret meetups over movie nights and math homework, wanted custody of the only good thing left in her rearview. And the worst part? Legally, she could try. She was the biological parent. On paper, I was nothing but a former stepfather. No blood. No signature on a birth certificate. Just years of bedtime stories, packed lunches, and unconditional presence. I wasn't entitled to anything. Unless Emma spoke. Unless she told the court who her real parent had been all along. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom in a charcoal suit that hadn't seen daylight in years. Nothing flashy. Nothing arrogant. Just clean lines and quiet conviction. Vanessa was already there. She wore white. Of course she did. A pathetic, calculated attempt to look like a saint in front of the judge. Her lawyer looked like he'd been pulled from a yacht club brochure. Gelled hair, polished teeth, smug as hell. Mine? A woman named Marcy Chin. Sharp, efficient, and famously allergic to bullsh** tea. Judge Harrison was a no-nonsense type. Former Marine, bench-hardened, and clearly tired of couples using kids as pawns in emotional trench warfare. Vanessa's attorney went first, painted her as a devoted mother reclaiming stability after a difficult marital breakdown. Threw in some buzzwords about emotional wellness, family unity, and restorative maternal bonds. He even tried to drag me, called me a non-biological guardian with no legal claim to custodial rights, and an obstruction to the mother's natural authority. I didn't flinch, because all that puffed-up legal tap dancing was about to fall flat under the one thing none of them saw coming. Emma. She walked into that courtroom on her own, hair pulled back, no makeup, just a black hoodie and a folded paper in her hand. The judge asked if she wanted to speak. She said yes. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. "Your Honor," she said, standing at the witness bench, "I know I'm technically a minor, and my opinion might not carry legal weight, but I hope you'll still listen." She glanced at Vanessa briefly, like she was looking at someone she used to know. "My mom hasn't been a mom for a long time." She lied. She hid things. She hurt people. And when she got caught, she tried to pretend none of it mattered. But it did. It does. It changed everything. The courtroom was dead silent. The only person who ever put me first was him. She pointed to me. "He's not my real dad. I get that. But he's the only one who showed up when it mattered. When I had nightmares, when I was sick, when I didn't know what the hell to do with growing up, he was there. Every time. No excuses." She unfolded the paper. "This is a list I made when I was 12. Things I wanted in a dad. I wrote it when my real dad ditched me for the 3rd year in a row." She read it. "Shows up. Doesn't lie. Listens. Makes pancakes. Says sorry when he's wrong. Laughs at dumb jokes. Doesn't leave." She folded it again and held it to her chest. He checked every box. Even the judge leaned back, visibly moved. "I don't want joint custody," Emma said. "I don't want supervised visits. I want to live with him. That's it." Vanessa tried to interrupt. The judge shut her down with a look that could curdle milk. 2 weeks later, the ruling came down. I was granted full guardianship, not custody, but the closest legal equivalent I could get as a non-blood relative. Vanessa's visitation? At Emma's discretion. Translation? She had no say anymore. And when Emma and I walked out of that courthouse, sunlight spilling across the concrete like a promise, she reached for my hand. Held it. Tight. That was the last time Vanessa tried to pull a legal stunt. The truth is, her war wasn't against me. It was against the version of herself she could have been, and every time she looked at me, she saw the man who reminded her of that failure. And that's a weight you can't file a motion against. But just when I thought the storm had passed, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a USB drive. And a note. 5 words, handwritten. He was never working alone. The envelope was unmarked. No return address. No postage. Which meant someone didn't mail it. They delivered it. By hand. That alone told me 2 things. This wasn't over. Whoever left that USB drive knew exactly where I lived, and wanted me to know they knew. I stared at the 5 words scribbled on the note. He was never working alone. That he had to mean Harold. But if Harold wasn't the top of the pyramid, and Bryce was just his shadow strategist, then who the hell was the architect? I didn't plug in the drive right away. I'm not an idiot. I took it to a buddy of mine, James Mercer, ex-cybercrime unit, now freelancing for banks that wanted to make sure their systems weren't being skimmed by digital leeches. We met in the back booth of a diner that smelled like burnt toast and old secrets. James had the drive hooked into a quarantined laptop, air-gapped and monitored. He raised an eyebrow. "Whoever sent this knows things." "What kind of things?" "The kind you bury with 2 NDAs and a non-disclosure clause deep enough to hit oil." Then he turned the screen to me. There it was. A folder. Named Client 0. Inside? Documents. Meeting transcripts. Offshore account data. Internal Denton memos. But what made my skin crawl were the emails. Not between Harold and Bryce. Not even Vanessa. These were from someone else. Someone labeled only as K. He wasn't on the payroll. Wasn't part of the org chart. But he had access. The emails were surgical short, coded, instructing Harold on where to move money, how to suppress whistleblowers, and which loose ends needed monitoring. One of the subject lines? "Keep an eye on the husband. He's not as blind as he looks." That one was dated 3 weeks before Harold's arrest. They've been watching me. Measuring me. Probably even laughing at me from some penthouse lounge while I played the loyal company man. But whoever K was, he didn't vanish when Harold fell. He just went deeper. Later that night, Emma was at a friend's sleepover, and I sat in my apartment staring out at the city skyline. I wasn't angry. I was curious. And curiosity is a dangerous thing in a man like me. Because when I get curious, I dig. I document. I plan. That's how I found the private investor logs. Denton Financial had quietly received a capital injection 6 months before the FBI sting. The funds had come from a hedge firm in Luxembourg. Nothing unusual on the surface. Until I traced it. Until I followed the shell companies. And there, buried in the paperwork, one name surfaced like a rotting corpse from the bottom of the lake. Kenneth Drake. A billionaire venture capitalist. Former tech CEO. Board member at a half-dozen shadowed firms. And once, briefly, the silent backer of Denton Financial's European expansion. Bryce never mentioned him. Neither did Harold. But Kenneth Drake had his fingerprints on everything. And now he had a reason to wipe mine off the board. I didn't call the FBI. Not yet. Because there was one more file on the drive. Labeled Event Insurance. It was a blackmail cache. Photos. Audio clips. Dirt. On everyone, judges, analysts, even agents. Including a few whose names I recognized from the Denton investigation. That was Drake's insurance policy. Burn me? I'd burn you all. But if someone was sending this to me, then maybe Drake wasn't as in control as he thought. Maybe someone inside his empire was cracking. And maybe, just maybe, they wanted help taking the king off the board. I leaned back in my chair, the screen still glowing. Harold was just the mouth. Bryce was the hand. But Kenneth Drake? He was the mind. And minds like his don't shatter when you shout. They shatter when you whisper. The thing about men like Kenneth Drake is, they don't exist on paper. Not really. Sure, there are bios, Forbes interviews, staged photos of him shaking hands at charity auctions. But those are all smoke and mirrors, PR illusions curated by a dozen handlers. The real man lives between the lines. In whispers. In emails never sent from his own account. In back channels, shell firms, and verbal instructions handed down through 3 intermediaries like some modern Roman emperor giving the nod to execution. But that's the flaw, isn't it? The moment you trust too many shadows, you forget which ones are watching you. I started small. 2 weeks after the USB drive landed in my mailbox, I created a burner email address and sent 5 encrypted messages to 5 carefully chosen inboxes. Not law enforcement. Not journalists. But internal defectors. Whistleblowers. Fired employees. The kind of people who knew the rot from the inside, but had never had proof. Now they did. Each message was simple. You were right. Here's what they didn't want you to see. Each one included a single file from the Client Zero folder. The reaction was fast. And messy. 3 former execs suddenly went public with NDA violations. Lawsuits followed. One podcast leaked an audio clip of Bryce Langston joking about burning files before the board gets curious. That clip? Straight from the USB. The internet lit up like a Christmas tree doused in gasoline. But Kenneth Drake? Still silent. He didn't sue. He didn't issue a press release. He just waited. And that was exactly what I wanted. Because silence from a man like him means only one thing. He's digging for you. So I left a breadcrumb. I posted an anonymous tip on a niche financial forum buried under 5 layers of VPNs about a Luxembourg firm tied to insider trading at a now-defunct investment branch. I knew Drake's people monitored those boards. 3 days later, someone tried to breach my home network. Didn't get in. But the signal pinged from a New York-based security firm registered to, guess who, Drake Strategic Holdings. I smiled. He was watching now, which meant I had his attention. Now came the hard part. Finding his pressure point. That's when I remembered the one place billionaires can't control. Their children. Drake had a daughter. Sienna Drake. 24. Fashion influencer. Paparazzi magnet. Publicly distanced from her father's corporate toxicity, but still funded by it. Her Instagram showed her partying in Ibiza one day, posting about veganism the next, all while wrapped in $1,000 silk and sipping cocktails that cost more than my car insurance. But tucked between the filters and the hashtags, I noticed something. She hated secrets. More importantly, she hated being lied to by her father. I found a clip from an old interview. Years ago, Sienna on some talk show, visibly irritated. I love my dad, but he's not a transparent guy. He built a wall around himself and expected us to guess what was behind it. I'm done guessing. Bingo. So I crafted another package. This one wasn't encrypted. It was glossy, personal, tied with a red ribbon like a gift. Inside? A printout of an email chain where Kenneth ordered the silencing of a whistleblower, with Sienna's PR firm listed as a client used to launder image rehab money. In other words, she wasn't just being lied to. She was involved, whether she knew it or not. The package was delivered to her agency with no name, No return address. Just a sticky note on top. The truth you were done guessing about. 3 days later, a post went live on Sienna's Instagram story. No caption. Just a black background with a single sentence. My silence has been bought long enough. That stops today. And just like that, Kenneth Drake had a crack in his foundation. The press hadn't named him yet, but the sharks were circling. One more push and the water turns red. By the time Kenneth Drake responded, it wasn't with lawyers. It wasn't with silence. It was with a letter. Hand-delivered. No courier label. No stamps. Just a thick cream-colored envelope left in the lobby of my building, addressed in perfect calligraphy. Mr. Garrison. Inside, on expensive stationery that probably cost more than my rent, were just 2 sentences. Well played. You've made your point. What do you want? That was it. Not a threat. Not a denial. Just the sound of a man who's used to controlling the weather suddenly realizing the sky doesn't listen to him anymore. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I waited. Because I needed the pressure to keep building. And it did. After Sienna's post, journalists started sniffing. Former employees. Overseas auditors. Reddit threads went viral with conspiracy diagrams that accidentally landed closer to the truth than most investigators ever had. Drake's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. And still, he waited. Which meant he was hoping I'd walk away satisfied. Like this was some corporate sparring match, and I'd won on points. He didn't understand. I never wanted to win. I wanted him to feel it. I wanted him to wake up every day with the taste of his own rot on his tongue. So I wrote him back. 1 sentence. Typed on a typewriter, just to make sure it couldn't be traced electronically. I want your name to mean what it actually is. That was it. 3 days later, his photo hit the news. Not from the past. Not a headline about another rising tech visionary. This time, it was raw. Someone had leaked documents linking Drake's shell companies to securities fraud, bribery, and hush money paid to foreign regulators. And not just someone. Sienna. She went on record. Held a press conference. She didn't try to spin it. She didn't blame his associates. She looked straight into the camera and said, "My father built an empire by burying the truth and selling the lie. I benefited from it. But I won't die with that guilt in my mouth. Let the system do what it's supposed to." Mic drop. The FBI reopened an investigation. The SEC followed. 2 foreign governments issued requests for extradition on unrelated charges, because it turns out, when the dominoes fall, everyone wants a piece. And Kenneth Drake? He disappeared. Just like that. One day he was there, looming, powerful, a ghost with teeth. The next, gone. No press release. No final appearance. Not even a mugshot. Just absence. That's the funny thing about men like him. They don't crash. They vanish. But his empire? His carefully built illusion? That didn't survive. The board voted to dissolve 2 of his holdings. 3 executives resigned in disgrace. And as for his legacy? It's being rewritten, 1 court document at a time. I stood in my kitchen the night it broke. News anchors tripping over their words. Photos flashing across the screen. Harold. Bryce. Vanessa. Reggie. Now Drake. All gone. All exposed. All hollowed out by their own greed. And I stood there, alone, pouring myself a glass of bourbon that tasted like something I hadn't felt in years. Closure. Not revenge. Not justice. Just peace. Emma came home later that night, tossed her bag on the floor, kicked off her shoes, and sat beside me on the couch. "It's over," she said. I nodded. "Yeah, it is." She leaned her head on my shoulder, silent for a long time. "You're not the same," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm not. But you're still, you." And in that moment, I realized something important. I hadn't just burned down their lies. I'd rebuilt myself in the ashes. This is where most people would say the end. But I've learned something in all this. Endings don't come with explosions. They come with silence. And a door that finally stays closed. You'd think that once the monsters fall, the world would start humming again. Birds chirping. Coffee brewing. Bills getting paid on time. But here's what no one tells you. When the storm ends, what you're left with isn't peace. It's silence. And silence? It's loud. The first week after the collapse felt like standing in a burned house. No more fires, no more sirens. Just soot. Just damage. I didn't have a job anymore, not officially. Denton Financial had crumbled, and I walked away with my conscience clean but my resume radioactive. Try explaining to a potential employer that you torched your last company to the ground on moral principle. They either call you a hero or a liability. No in-between. And the money? Whistleblower rewards don't last forever, not when lawyers, therapists, and new housing eat away at it like termites on a legacy. But I didn't regret it. Not once. I'd burned the right bridges. And if I had to swim across the river, barefoot and bleeding, fine. At least I knew I wasn't walking with snakes anymore. Emma adjusted faster than I did. Teenagers are like that. Resilient in weird, unpredictable ways. She made new friends. Changed her major. Started journaling again. One night, I walked past her bedroom door and heard laughter. Actual, unguarded laughter. I stood there, listening like a starving man outside a bakery. That sound was everything I'd fought for. But something still sat in my chest like a bad tooth. A dull, persistent ache. I kept wondering, what now? Because when your life was built around the battle, around revenge, around gathering evidence, around staying one step ahead, you don't just switch off. You don't wake up and decide to plant tomatoes or learn yoga. You walk your apartment like it's still being watched. You double-check locks. You flinch when the phone rings. The habits of war don't leave when the war ends. They nest inside you. One afternoon, I took a long walk through Central Park. Just me, a coffee, and the slow realization that I had no idea what the hell I wanted from my life anymore. Then, somewhere near the pond, I saw him. Not Harold. Not Bryce. Reggie. Sitting on a bench like the past hadn't chewed him up and spit him out. He looked older. Thinner. Alone. He didn't see me. Or if he did, he didn't react. Just stared at the water like it might show him a version of himself worth forgiving. I didn't walk over. Didn't need to. We were both ghosts in each other's stories now. But that night, something strange happened. A knock at the door. No delivery. No neighbor. Just an envelope. Again. Inside? A single page. Typed. Anonymous. It read, "She's writing a book. A memoir. And your name is in it. No signature. No return address." But I didn't need one. I knew exactly who she was. Vanessa. I sat down. Heart thudding. Mind racing. I'd made peace with what she'd done. What she'd cost me. But I hadn't accounted for one last twist of the knife. Not a lawsuit. Not another custody ploy. Just a retelling of history. From her side. And if I knew Vanessa, that version would have me painted as the villain. Or worse, a footnote. I could have ignored it. Could have walked away and let her lies fade into the literary ether. But I'd spent too long letting others write my story. And I wasn't about to let her end mine with a comma. I didn't rush. Didn't storm into a bookstore or fire off a cease and desist like some panicked public figure desperate to claw back control. No. I waited. Because truth has a funny way of surfacing like oil on water. And lies? They always bubble first. I called in a favor from an old contact at a publishing imprint in Brooklyn. Guy owed me from a corporate leak I plugged years ago, before my life turned into a courtroom novella. Yeah, he said over the phone. We got a galley copy a few weeks ago. It's making noise. Advance buzz. That kind of low, dirty buzz you only get when someone bleeds on the page. She's calling it burned ends, surviving marriage to a stranger. Cute. Even threw in a culinary metaphor. She always did think of herself as the main course. A few days later, a manila envelope arrived on my doorstep, hand-delivered. Again, pre-release manuscript. All 236 pages. I poured whiskey, put my phone on silent, and started reading. By page 10, I was laughing. By page 20, I was grinding my teeth. By page 50, I was cold. She painted herself as a victim. A delicate woman seduced by power, trapped by corruption, lied to by everyone, especially her husband. Me? I was obsessive, secretive, detached. She called our marriage a cage of performative affection and accused me of emotional neglect. No mention of Reggie. No mention of the burner phone. No mention of the FBI sting she got swept into because she chose to get in bed with criminals, literally. She even implied that Emma's trust in me was manipulated. That part? That nearly flipped the table. But then I found it. Buried near the end. A single sentence. There are things I'll never admit to, even on paper. Some stories only belong to ghosts. That was her tell. That's when I knew she was scared. Because that line? That was for me. She knew I'd read it. She knew I'd be watching. And she wanted to plant the seed that there was still mystery. Still doubt. Still wiggle room in case she ever needed to play the sympathy card again. What she didn't know. I had my own manuscript. I wasn't writing it with ink. I was writing it with evidence. With truth. Every document. Every recording. Every screenshot and audio file I'd handed the FBI, preserved and timestamped. You want a memoir? Fine. But mine comes with receipts. The next day, I met with a journalist. Her name was Ivy DeWitt. Sharp. Calm. Unbought. She'd covered corporate corruption for years and had a reputation for chewing through PR lies like a paper shredder on espresso. I handed her a flash drive and said, "You're going to be getting a lot of press releases from a woman named Vanessa Garrison. When you do, I want you to look at what's not in the book." She raised an eyebrow. "You giving me a counter story?" "I'm giving you the story. And you don't want credit?" "I want clarity. That's all." "So why me?" "Because you're the only reporter I know who doesn't sell truth by the paragraph." She nodded once. "Then let's clean up her fiction." The article dropped a week later. Headline: "The Truth Behind Burnt Ends. What Vanessa Garrison's Memoir Didn't Tell You." It was brutal. Fact-checked. Document sourced. Timeline reinforced. Vanessa's narrative unraveled faster than a discount sweater in a hurricane. Social media turned on her within 48 hours. Bookstores quietly pulled orders. Her publisher released a bland, non-committal statement about ongoing review. And just like that, her comeback story burned out before it even hit the shelves. Emma read the article on her lunch break. She forwarded it to me with one sentence. "Now that's the book I'll remember." Vanessa never called. Never tried to apologize. That part of the game was over. But for the first time in months, I felt something real. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just balance. Like the scale had finally evened out. Of course, that's when the phone rang. Unknown number. Blocked ID. I almost didn't answer. But I did. And the voice on the other end? Wasn't Vanessa. Wasn't Harold. Wasn't even Drake. It was a voice I hadn't heard since before the marriage. From a life I thought I'd buried. The voice on the phone was older than the lies, older than the betrayal, older than even the man I thought I was when this whole thing began. "Hey," the voice said, quiet. Hesitant. "It's been a long time." I froze. Because I knew who it was. And I hadn't heard her voice in over 15 years. My mother. We hadn't spoken since I was 24. Not after the fallout. Not after she walked out on my father and left behind nothing but unpaid bills, a half-written letter, and a legacy of whispered apologies that never came. She remarried. Moved 2 states over. Started fresh. I stayed behind to watch my father drink his pride into a slow, bitter grave. She didn't come to the funeral. She sent flowers. Lilies. He hated lilies. "I read about the book," she said. "About everything. How'd you get this number?" Emma. She thought it was time. Of course she did. Emma, still trying to patch holes she didn't tear. "What do you want?" She was silent for a long time. "To tell you I'm sorry." I laughed. Not bitter. Just tired. For what? Leaving? Or for teaching me that love is just the opening act to betrayal? For not staying? For not explaining why? Now she had my attention. Because in all the years I'd played back that scene, her keys on the table, the door closing behind her, I never got the why. She started talking. Slowly. Honestly. Said she left because she was afraid. That she married my father thinking she'd grow into love. That when he became cold, she mistook that for normal. That she stayed too long out of guilt. And when guilt turned into resentment, it became a prison. "I didn't know how to leave with grace," she said. "So I left with damage." That hit. Because I realized then, I'd been walking around for years thinking Vanessa was the first storm. But the rain started long before her. I was just too soaked to notice. "You always tried to fix people," she said softly. "Even as a kid. You'd stay up helping your friends with homework you didn't understand. You hated when people cried. You'd try to make them laugh even if you didn't feel like it." She paused. "I think you married someone you thought you could fix. Like maybe if you held her long enough, she wouldn't leave the way I did." I didn't speak. Because she wasn't wrong. "I'm not asking for anything," she added. "I just didn't want to be another shadow in your story." And that's what finally cracked me. Because this wasn't about forgiveness. This was about understanding. I didn't forgive her. Not entirely. But I saw her now, not as the villain in my childhood, but as a broken woman who ran from one prison into another. Like Vanessa. Like me. After we hung up, I sat alone in the dark. No drink. No distractions. Just the quiet unraveling of a truth I hadn't been ready to face. That maybe betrayal doesn't start when someone cheats. Maybe it starts when someone teaches you to accept less than you deserve. And maybe the real war I'd been fighting wasn't against Vanessa, or Harold, or Drake. Maybe it was against the version of myself that thought loyalty meant staying chained to fire. I didn't call her back. Not yet. But I didn't block her number, either. That was progress. The kind that doesn't feel triumphant. Just necessary. That night, Emma sat down next to me with 2 mugs of tea and said, "You okay?" "No." "Do you want to be?" "I'm working on it." She smiled. "Then we're good." The rebuild had already begun. But this time, it wasn't about revenge or leverage or justice. It was about healing, even if the scars stayed. Especially if they did.